Ladies and gentlemen, aloha. It's my privilege to moderate this panel today, Hawaii and Human Dignity. My name is Aaron Shumway. I'm the director of the Faculty of Religious Education here at BYU Hawaii. I'm also a kama'aina of this sacred place, which Dr. Housman so eloquently expressed in her oli, which she wrote, by the way, with her students. So that's an original that you've just heard. I want us to have as much time as possible with our panelists, and so I will just introduce them briefly, or at least give them the introductions they deserve. We'll start with Dr. Housman, then go with Dr. Kinkley, and then Jaimee Neel. Dr. Housman is a native Hawaiian who grew up in New Jersey on a peach orchard of all places. She's a proud alumna of BYU Hawaii and received her Ph.D. in Hawaiian and Indigenous Language and Culture Revitalization at the University of Hawaii in Hilo. She has long been a promoter and defender of Olelo Hawaii, the native Hawaiian language. In 1986, her testimony helped reverse a law banning the use of Olelo Hawaii in Hawaii public schools. And a year later, she was invited to become the first Hawaiian language immersion teacher in the Hawaii State public school system on the island of Oahu. She is currently the Dean and Associate Professor of the Faculty of Language, Culture, Language, and Performing Arts here at BYU Hawaii, and is also the Jonathan Napela Center for Hawaiian and Pacific Studies Chair. She has been honored with awards for excellence in teaching, including the Native Hawaiian Education Association Educator of the Year, the State of Hawaii Senate Award, and the Ahahui Olelo Hawaii Award, and the Leeward District Teacher of the Year Award. But if you ask her, her greatest honor is to be called tutu, or grandmother, by her 9 grandchildren. Dr. Gregg Kinkley is a longtime resident of Hawaii and has made excellent contributions in the legal and religious studies fields. After receiving his PhD in linguistics and then a Juris Doctorate from the Indiana University Marr School of Law, Dr. Kinkley practiced law in Chicago for a few years before making Hawaii home. He was in private practice for several years before moving to the public sector and served as the commissioner for the Hawaii State Public Utilities Commission and then executive director of the Division of Consumer Advocacy in the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. For the last 18 years before he retired, he served as a deputy attorney general for the state of Hawaii. And though he's been retired now for a couple years, he currently teaches classical Tibetan in the Department of Religions and Ancient Civilizations at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, and also conducts elementary and advanced classes in Talmud in Congregation Sof Ma'arav in Honolulu. And finally, Jaimee Macanas Neel is another local woman who has accomplished great things. She was born in the neighboring town of Kahuku, but is from the storied Kikaoha family, which is one of the earliest families to settle in Lāʻie here. She received her undergraduate degree from Brigham Young University in Utah, a master's in liberal arts from Harvard University, and then returned to BYU to receive her Juris Doctorate. She worked as a school teacher with Teach for America in Washington, D.C. and New York City before joining the U.S. Department of State. She's currently a senior advisor for the Office of International Religious Freedom, and her overseas assignments include Shanghai, Cairo, London, Beijing, Nairobi, and Athens. She has extensive experience on U.S.-China foreign policy in mainland China, the Mediterranean, Southeastern Europe, the Western Balkans, and Sub-Saharan Africa. She is married to fellow Foreign Service Officer James Neel, who is here with her tonight, along with their son, and they have 4 beautiful children. Let's welcome our distinguished panelists. And we'd now like to turn the time over to Dr. Housman.
Aloha mai. Can everybody hear me? Okay, mai ka'iloa. I just wanted to add that my family comes from the island of Hawaii, out in Honolulu, where the beautiful Akaka Falls are. So, mahalo. And looking at the theme for this conference, Oceanian Perspectives on Human Dignity, one of the first things that I thought of was the Hawaiian perspective, or Hawaiian worldview. And so, as an educator, that is what I would like to kind of share from my perspective with the other panelists that are here with me today. In 1983, the Ahapuna Leo, which is close to what the schooling that was done, Kohangareo in New Zealand, very similar in the direction and the approach and the focus on the Hawaiian language. That began in 1983, and in 1987 is when the Hawaiian language immersion schools began. And so there were a lot of different challenges along the way. And by 1998, one of the things that a group of educators from the different islands with representation from native speakers and teachers from the Punana Leo, and also our professors from the university got together to talk about, as a person, a student who graduates from an immersion school, what are some of the expectations? What do we envision for that person, that student, to come away with as they graduate? And so the Kumohonua Mauliola philosophy was created, composed by this group of educators and native speakers. And it actually focuses on 3 different areas: the Piko, the Mauli, and the Honua. And so I will briefly share the different thoughts about these 3 different areas. But this has become the guiding document, the guiding philosophy in everything that we do in our immersion education, how we develop our curriculum, the publication of our literature, teacher training. And so it's an important perspective. As we look at dignity, what is it that is important from the Hawaiian worldview, that we maintain that dignity for our people? The first one is the Piko, which are 3 centers. And we refer to those 3 centers even on our bodies. And the first one is the Piko. We call it the Piko-i, which is the spiritual center that connects us to our akua, to our ancestors. In ancient Hawaii, mothers would create this poultice out of herbs and put this poultice in that fontanelle side area on the top of the head, where that soft spot, in order to keep it open as long as possible, so that the child would have this connection to the akua and to the spiritual side as they were developing as a baby, as a child. And of course, our second Piko is our connection to our mother when we are born. And this connection represents our family, our ancestral, and our ties to the past, our genealogy. The third Piko is our creative Piko, and has to do with our future generations, our posterity to come after us. And so these connections, these relationships are so important to be a part of our families. We see it as an important part of our churches and our teachings and our education. When you have a traditional Hawaiian story, when we look at English literature, especially fairy tales, we start with once upon a time there was a beautiful princess, blah, 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 blah. In Hawaiian, it's o mea ke kane, o mea ka wahine, ua noho laua ma ke kahi wahi. So traditional stories will identify who was the father, who was the mother, and the name of the place where they came. So when we're creating literature, it's important that when we're focusing on Hawaiian literature, even today, if we're creating new stories, that we begin with those same kind of what we call meiwi, things that are traditional Hawaiian, that when we look at a song or a mele or a mo'olelo story, that it has those elements to make it a Hawaiian story or a Hawaiian song or a Hawaiian chant. The second area of the Kumuhonua Mauliola is the honua, places. We've heard a lot from all of our delegates, from the different islands, the importance of place and how we are rooted to those places, even to the extent that young mothers will take the placenta or the pico left from when the child is born and the pico dries up, to put them in a place that will connect that child forever to that place. So we have different honua, and unfortunately with the great mahele of the 1848, when the land was divided, there are over 3/4 of the Hawaiian population who did not receive land. And so we see the residue of that decision that was made back in the 1800s that still comes back to haunt us today, because we have many Hawaiians who are homeless, cannot afford to purchase land, to build homes. And so that dignity, being able to have a place that you can go back to whether it's to worship. We have Mauna Kea, where Kukia I Mauna Kea, where a lot of our native Hawaiian people went back to the Mauna Kea mountain to keep the construction of the new telescopes up on the mountain, because it's considered a sacred place. So that honua, which begins, the first one is the ieve, or the family, and that is where our children are nourished. They learn their language, learn the customs, the culture, and as that becomes firm, it's also becomes a part of the community where everyone in the community, whether it's school or church or neighbors, become part of that education and raising our children. And once that becomes pa'a, then the third area is the honua au holooko'a, which if this is pa'a, if this is steadfast and firm, then that child is able to go out into the world as a Hawaiian, to share and to understand where they come from, who they are, who they represent, and be able to, with dignity, share those ideas and thoughts with others, and in respect, to respect other peoples and where they come from, and their places, and their families, and their genealogy. The last area of the Kumuhonua Mauliola is called the Mauli, which is kind of like your life force of who you are. It can kind of be compared to fire. And when it's burning bright, then we have that full purpose and dignity and know who we are. The committee recognized 4 different areas of the Mauli, our life force, who contributes to who we are. One is the pili uhane, our spiritual, intuitive, our relationship with God, our relationship with our ancestors, or even the forest, the ocean, the land, that respect and spiritual connection to the things around us. Another area is the lavena, which is our behavior, our actions. In Hawaii, hospitality is so important. If you go to someone's home or someone comes to visit you, you provide drink and food and sustenance and even a place to stay if needed. How we greet one another. We hear over and over about the aloha spirit. How, of course, when we're in a business saying, hi, I'm so-and-so, right? That's one perspective. Or we see with our Asian countries, the bowing to show respect. In Hawaii, it is that embracing, the honi, the kissing. Boy, the time goes by so fast. Okay, and then ike ku'una, I'll speed up. Ike ku'una is our traditional knowledge which is passed down from our ancestors, whether it's voyaging, or making leis, or hula, or working in the kalo, Lāʻie, all of those different arts and crafts. These are all traditional knowledge that passed down from our ancestors. And then the last one is the olelo, which is an important part. If we lose our olelo, we lose who we are. And for Hawaii, this is the only place, if we lose it here, we lose it forever. So that maoli can be distinguished, it can be extinguished, or it can burn bright, depending on the dignity that is shown towards a particular people. We know that in the 1820s is when the missionaries came, and quickly the alphabet was created. By 1822, primers were being made. And what I find interesting is that the first students in the schools here in Hawaii, and I'm thinking public schools, right, but not similar to what we have today, just open schools for people to learn, it was actually focused on the adults. Within a very short amount of time, 50,000 adults, parents, kupuna, learned how to read in Hawaiian. It wasn't until the next several years, maybe the next decade, where it turned to the children, to teach the children, taught by natives. And so we have this 1897, when we look at the census and literacy, Hawaiians are there up at the top. And those who were pure Hawaiian, it was 83.97% literacy. Part Hawaiians, 91.21% literacy for people who could read and write in Hawaii. And so we have this, one of the best statistics within the world for literacy. And then not too long after that, within 6 years, we have the overthrow of the monarchy in 1893. Sorry, before this. 1893 was the overthrow, and then in 1896, we have a ban on the Hawaiian language. And that has created a problem for our Hawaiian people for over a century. With that ban, it was on the laws of the books where we could not teach Hawaiian legally in the schools. And so as young children, and we hear the stories, and we've heard stories from our Maori friends, where children, when they went to school, if they spoke Hawaiian, they were severely punished. And so it was almost as an effort to eradicate the Hawaiian language among the Hawaiian people. And so we have the legal basis for Hawaiian language immersion. When it came about, of course, it started in the preschools, and it was private, so it was taught through the medium of Hawaiian. But as we wanted our children to continue within the public school system, the law had to be changed. Fortunately, in 1978, there was a constitutional convention in which some major decisions were made. One of them is that the Hawaiian language became one of the 2 official languages in the state of Hawaii. And the other thing that occurred during that time through the Constitution is that in 1986, because of that ruling that Hawaiian was now an official language, in 1986 we were able to overturn the law that was on the books where Hawaiian could not be taught and used within the public school system, which has really opened up the door for education of our students. Through that process, we have seen, after these wonderful figures in 1897, we see a decline for Hawaiians in almost every area, whether it's reading, writing, education, incarceration, drug use, because of the dignity. When I go back to the maoli, right, that was burning so bright, dimmed down. And it's through the efforts of our people. And I hear from our Maori group, it comes from the people, the grassroots, who have to make that decision that this is important for our people to fight the fight. We've made a lot of progress. We know through our culture-based schools, we know through our immersion schools, statistics being done by Kamehameha, we see that it works when our children are given that privilege of being educated through their language, with their culture, with appropriately cultural type materials and resources, then that maoli will grow and continue to grow. We haven't arrived, but we are on the journey to continue to ensure that that dignity for our Hawaiian people will continue. And mahalo nui loa.
Dr. Kinkley, please.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו Amen. Since everyone else had a language, I thought I should do something. Okay, that's it would otherwise be completely irrelevant, but that's the last verse of the Kaddish, which is an ancient Hebrew prayer that we only say when there are at least 10 Jews in the room, so you've got me on a technical violation already, thank you. But I'm sure I could make some sort of legal argument for that. But there is something in it that's salient to this conversation. That was written over 1,000 years ago, and Jews have this thing about never changing anything. So it's been said that way with that intonation for over a millennium. But I added in the words v'kol yoshvei tevel. So the verse says, may he who is in heaven making peace in the heights bring peace down to us and to all Israel, and let's say Amen. And that's the end of it. So it's rather selfish. It's only getting everyone in the room and then anyone else is a Jew. But not so long ago, we added in the words, and to all the inhabitants of earth. So it is possible to change bad habits over time. Okay. I know what you're thinking. What the heck is this guy doing? I have two wonderful and highly educated and experienced women, and here you got this old Jewish bugger in the middle who doesn't. Obviously, I'm not Mormon. Obviously, I'm not Hawaiian. So why am I even here, right? And I wonder myself. But I wasn't going to read what I wrote either, because candidly, when I finally did read what I wrote, it was so turgid I couldn't get through it all. So if there are some high points, hopefully I'll get those out, and I don't recommend you read it later. So my professional career, to the extent it can be called a career, is in three parts. I was a linguist, and then I was in Southeast Asian languages. Then I was a lawyer for many, many years, and now I'm teaching classical religious literature at University of Hawaii. So when I look at dignity, I guess I'll go through all three of these persona. And of course, being both a linguist and a lawyer, who can keep me from asking, what does dignity even mean? I always wondered, right? So I notice you have a little thing downstairs that broached the issue to some of the other Oceanic languages. I read that with great interest. But in Hebrew, the word that most often is used for dignity is kavod, which comes from a root that really means to be heavy. So perhaps like fraught, or like heavy man, you know, but someone with gravitas, right? To have some multilingual puns in there. But the occurrence of that word is made most famous in the 5th commandment of the 10 that were given to Moses, an old friend of mine, on Mount Sinai many years ago, not the hospital. Honor your father and your mother is the way it's often translated in English. But they use that word kabed. It's imperative, meaning to dignify. In other words, to treat with respect and care your father and mother. What's very interesting about the 5th commandment, actually about the first 5 commandments as opposed to the second 5, is that one way or another, each of the first 5 commandments actually have an explanation as to why they are commandments. After that, 6 through 10, it's almost as if God, as it were, was looking at his watch and saying, we don't have a lot of time, Moish, let's just get the rest of these out of here, right? So don't steal, don't cheat, don't do this, right? Fine. But for honoring father and mother, interestingly enough, that said, honor your father and your mother so that your life in the land will be long. Okay, so this gives us a hint, at least what the ancient Hebrews thought dignity was about, right? That it's a two-way street. It's that not only it helps them, but it helps you and will make your quality of life better. So that's from the Hebrew perspective. Now, this is where I really put my big feet in it. This is the first sentence from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You've got, in Hawaiian, you've got an old Jew reading Hawaiian between 2 native speakers. What could go wrong? Ha nau ku o ko'a ia, na ka naka a paulo, a ua kau like ka hano hano, a me nā pono ki vila, maluno kako pākahi. So here they're using the word hano hano for respect. I don't know if that resonates with you, but dignity. But what's interesting to me as an Austronesian linguist is that hano hano is a reduplicated word, although the word reduplicated is duplicated too. But it's often used in the Indonesian languages for plurality or for intensifying it. But again, just like the Hebrew, it suggests there's a mutuality, there's a going back and forth. It's not just one way, it's both ways. So I think these languages and the way they've decided to articulate this evanescent quality does give us a hint to the racial memory we all share about what dignity is, why it's important, and how to achieve it. It is also interesting that when it gets into civil rights, which is the way that most of these rights are enforced in modern Western societies, they use the term na pono kivila, so it's using a foreign word, which suggests that perhaps the idea was not native to Hawaiians, and that's something I'll touch on later in a different way. The Western approach to self-government from monarchy evolved greatly over the ages, but certain characteristics endure. 3 I think of is that government and rights from the government were a social contract. A contract means something written down. I don't think it's necessarily a pun that word could also be read as contract. So it's something that's diminished, written, diminished, reduced to writing, as it were. Another key concept of the Western tradition is that rights are adversarial. The people against the monarch, wresting the rights and the powers which by default would resign with the monarch away from the monarch and giving them to the people. And the third is that it's highly technically and legal, that there are 3 branches in check. There's a cultural mission statement in our Constitution with the courts to interpret it. Courts shouldn't be political, but delegation of rights is a fundamentally political thing, and politics always enters into law. Law would be bankrupt without it. The problem is it can swing either way, and I think we're sort of swinging the other way right now, so it will ebb and flow with the power of the people in charge at the time. I guess my warning and the burden of my message is that when the Hawaiian people are looking for dignity and for the enforcement of that dignity through the law, be careful the instruments you use, because a Western approach to rights only really works, if it works at all, to people who are comfortable with that tradition, that adversarial tradition, that we call it neshama, that non-spiritual sort of connection. It stresses dualism, duality, me against the rest of you, black against white, not something unified and holistic. If you decide that you're going to gain your rights through written documents, contested in courts, and holding on to it vociferously through adversarial procedures, sometimes you're going to lose. But if those rights and those concepts are baked into the fundamental idea of what your society is, and that all people already have these things and they don't need to be asked for, let alone fought for, you have a more fundamental basis for something that can endure. And that's what I'd like to see. I wish I had the answer for how to do that, but I was always struck that although the Hawaiian government within historical times started out as a monarchy, as many of the European ones did, certainly by the time of Queen Lāʻie, there was an epiphany, an understanding from the monarchy that the people are more important, and great sacrifices by the rulers are made to help the people in the long run. This suggests to me that the Hawaiian people are betrayed somewhat if they want to rest their precious rights and their human dignity on a Western or European approach to law and vindication of rights. It may be inevitable because of recent history, but if there's ever a way you can find to get yourself out from under that, I would, because it hasn't worked so well for the rest of us either. As a matter of fact, just to go off script a bit, there are some interesting similarities between the ancient Hebrews and the Hawaiians. We both developed this intensely spiritual culture that's rooted to the land and understood as being inseparable from the land, taken away from us when our land was taken away. And we both enjoyed a renaissance in our spiritual and political nature when we started paying attention to the language that was unique to us, for Jews with Hebrew and Hawaiian for the Hawaiian people. And we understood again how that idiom, that specific idiom, clothes the thoughts that only we can have and forges our people not only as a nation, but makes us one with posterity, going back from before and something to give our children. So I was very, very excited as a linguist and also just as a human being, and even a Jew who'd seen it happen with Israel not so long ago, when the Total Immersion Project started, because I thought, wow, I'm going to be at ground zero for something like this. I thought that was something that I thought was long overdue and very exciting. I remember as a student buying a T-shirt for the Protect Kahu'olawe Ohana and thinking that maybe someday there'd be a Hawaii governor. Come on, that's never going to happen.
It's happened already.
Oh, it happened already. But, just to show you, I thought all those things were impossible, and within the last 50 years, they all happened. So, maybe there's something good to come of it in the future. Who knows? I'll skip because I saw that. Chutzpah, a good Jewish word, chutzpah. Chutzpah can mean cheek or nerve or guts. It usually is fairly pejorative, but it comes from the word chutz, which means outside, and pa or peh, which means mouth. So your mouth is going outside of yourself. You're really making something big out of yourself, right? Chutzpah. So to some extent, given the topic of today and the current political situation, I would say there's a little bit of chutzpah in me coming here at all, and indeed in wearing this kippah, that already brands me as a Jew who, whether he likes it or not, has to take some responsibility and at least a nodding acquaintance with what's happening in the Middle East right now. It's the elephant in the room, and I'm sure we're all thinking about it in one way or another. I don't really want to get into it, and it would get us away from our topic here, but I would warn that a culture that stays close to its roots and prioritize its heritage, communicated through love, devotion, and selflessness, usually will not take a wrong path, because that sort of covenant is one that renews itself naturally. If you start getting into having real estate, needing to make political decisions, needing to make sure your sphere of influence stays where it does, getting further away from the spiritual and more into the practical day-to-day nationhood, you start acting as nations do. And nations do not have a very good record, folks. They just do not. Even within themselves, despite without themselves. So whatever path the great Hawaiian people take, with whom I've been privileged to have some time on this land for about a half century now, I would hope, and I really strongly think that they will, find amongst themselves a way to go forward that will avoid these pitfalls which we Jews have fallen into, and many others, and it's very much a current problem, and it's not just with the Hawaiians. But please, please learn from our mistakes and try to be better than we. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Jaimee.
Dear guests and everyone here, aloha. Thank you, Dr. Housman, Dr. Shumway, Dr. Kinkley, for your remarks. I'm honored to join you on this panel. It is really wonderful to be gathered here in this beautiful place, a special place to me. And as mentioned, both sides of my family are from here. And I want to recognize my grandma is here. I am her oldest grandchild, and she's very proud of me. I have Filipino, Hawaiian, Chinese, and Scottish heritage, and I've also been a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for my entire life. I'm also a U.S. diplomat, and for the last 20 years have worked for the U.S. Department of State, which is equivalent to what you may be familiar with as a foreign ministry. That's my family. There are a few Native Hawaiians in the U.S. Diplomatic Corps, and I'm privileged to currently serve as a senior advisor in the Office of International Religious Freedom. And I just wanted to note that my comments here today are my own views. I'm not representing the U.S. government to you today. So please don't quote me as saying the U.S. government told me this. I don't want to retire that soon. As an American diplomat, I represent my country and its values overseas, and we work on issues that are critical to U.S. foreign policy. And one of these most critical issues is the promotion of universal human rights, and a core value is respect for freedom of religion or belief. This is a key freedom that goes back to the founding of our country and is enshrined in our Constitution. The United States believes that when governments safeguard freedom of religion or belief, governments in turn are more peaceful, more secure, and become more prosperous. Nations can never achieve their fullest potential when people are excluded from education, healthcare, employment, etc., because of their beliefs. Because of this, promoting religious freedom of belief is vital to America's U.S. national security interests, as we see that the more free that people are, that religion for freedom of belief is protected, the better the world becomes for everyone. I want to also note that in this work, we are fighting and advocating for people. That has come up quite a bit. Not specific churches, not organizations, not specific governments. The focus is on personal stories and on people. And this strikes me as a connection between our discussions here on human dignity. This concept goes to the heart of the work, I feel, that to be able to freely follow your conscience, to change your beliefs and to express your beliefs in public and in private, and to manifest that in the way that you choose to find peace enjoy here. I'd like to share how I have observed these issues in my career overseas, and then connect those back to how these observations have been informed by my experiences in Hawaii on this concept of human dignity. In different regions around the world, I have seen the impact that government, societal, and cultural attitudes can have. First, on government. When governments control narratives and the ability to manifest or carry out your religion or belief system, it can stifle relationships and communities and spiritual growth. We saw this while my family and I were living in China. I served an LDS mission to Taiwan, and after my mission, I was very eager to get to mainland China. However, I soon discovered that my experiences as a Chinese-speaking missionary in Taiwan were very different from how you can practice your religion in mainland China, as the Chinese government officially recognizes only 5 religions, of which my faith was not one of them. However, LDS church members who were foreign or did not hold a PRC passport, we were allowed to meet as a group. However, we had the restriction that we could not interact with other LDS members who were PRC nationals or held Chinese passports. At times, the Religious Affairs Bureau would limit our numbers to no more than 50 people at a time in a congregation, so sometimes we would have to attend church in shifts or meet in members' homes to accommodate this. But we strictly adhered to these rules because we wanted to preserve our ability to meet, but we also wanted to be sure that we avoided drawing government scrutiny to ourselves and possibly to other Chinese LDS members. Since we've been here in Hawaii, I've had the great opportunity to teach as an adjunct professor, and I've been able to meet some mainland students who are LDS members. It's been amazing to find out that we actually went to church in the same building in Beijing, but we never saw each other. We were never allowed to interact in any way. In fact, once the foreigners met, we had to completely vacate parking lot, everything. We could not be on the premises before Chinese members could come. One LDS Chinese member told us that their daughter never knew there were other church kids just like her around the world. She had no idea that it was an international primary group. This experience in China demonstrates how governments can control or limit these beliefs. In addition to governmental control, societal attitudes can also have a big impact. Our family was living in Athens, Greece, and we felt very accepted and welcome there. But again, we were foreigners. We were not Greek. In Greece, even though it may not be illegal for a person to change their religion, it is difficult to do so without paying a very high social cost. Sadly, our LDS congregation in Athens felt this. There was an investigative journalist who joined the church and subsequently published an article outing the church list membership names. This publicly exposed many members who had converted from the Greek Orthodox Church to the LDS Church, and fearing condemnation, they had never told their families or friends that they had done so. When the news broke, they were shunned by neighbors, they lost jobs, they lost their families. These social norms of freedom of religion and belief can be harder to overcome sometimes than simply breaking down barriers by laws or governments. This is our missionary group in Athens. One of the elders in the middle is from Kauai, Hawaiian elder, and great missionary. He told us he wasn't able to teach anyone or baptize anyone on his mission during his time. I've also lived in countries where predominant religious and cultural attitudes can lead to persecution of religious minorities or non-believers. We lived in Cairo during the Arab Spring, and seen as a foreign sect, our small LDS church group could continue to meet largely unaffected. There were many outbreaks and sectarian persecution during this time. Our Egyptian friends who were Coptic Christians feared to practice openly. Their cultural traditions and beliefs were often targeted with hate speech or other discrimination. We observed a similar situation living in Kenya. In Kenya, a predominantly Christian country, on Sundays nearly all of the people in the nation's capital can be seen wearing their Sunday best walking to church. However, political and religious motivated grievances can flare up to sectarian violence between Christian and Muslim communities. Both countries, Egypt and Kenya, very religious, but diverse religions and belief systems still struggle to be equally recognized and protected. I'm grateful for these experiences. They've strengthened my faith, We gained lifelong friends and a deep love and appreciation for the people of these countries. And no country is perfect. I want to put that out there, and my country is not perfect either. This has taught me that some of these challenges require long-term solutions. It may take generations to shape attitudes and public opinion, and this is why the conversations and discussions that we are having matter. Reflecting on the question of what human dignity means in Hawaii, I've been deeply influenced by the values I was taught in my upbringing. Human dignity in Hawaii, I think one piece of it means that parents can teach and raise their children in their religious family traditions and belief systems, and they're also freely able to change or adapt. My dad was Filipino and raised Catholic. He was an altar boy, but later changed his faith to join the LDS Church. And also to marry my mom. He married my mom, who was an LDS member, so I think that was good. My faith tradition on my mother's side of the family goes back generations to the first LDS missionaries to come to Hawaii. This foundation has been able to flourish here. It provides a sense of self and identity from the religious traditions that were passed on to me. Another value I learned in Hawaii is the respect for sacred things. This may be for your own religion, but it also includes all things deemed sacred to any religion or belief. In Hawaii, there are ancient Hawaiian burial sites that are sacred to Native Hawaiians, both historically and spiritually. As we have heard from many panels, there is a widespread respect in Oceania for indigenous beliefs that we are tied to this land and our ancestors in a spiritual way. We are taught to honor our ancestors and ourselves by preserving and protecting our environment and all life around us. My two oldest children worked during the summer on a conservation team for one of these sacred ancient Hawaiian sites. They cleared out invasive plants, built pathways, and restored garden hedges. I was grateful that during this experience, they also learned about the spiritual connection to the land and that their daily work for several hours a day working out in the sun wasn't just about pulling weeds and gathering sticks, but it brought them closer to their heritage and connecting them to their past and a part of something that was greater. Additionally, here in Hawaii, there is a strong spirit of inclusion and commitment to community. Hawaii is full of mixed heritages like my own, and this blending of cultures resonates in the close ties that is felt among communities. Especially here in Lāʻie, we celebrate the blending of Pacific Islands and all cultures, and all are welcome. Last night, my daughter danced in Kahuku High School's May night celebrations at the Polynesian Cultural Center. She told us she wanted to dance Tahitian and Tongan. After a couple of practices, she came home and said, "I don't think I can dance Tongan." And we said, "Why not? It sounds like fun. It looks like fun." And she said, "Well, I'm not Tongan." And I reminded her, "You're not Tahitian either." She danced in the Tahitian group. That's her in the middle in the yellow. This inclusiveness is also found in how family roots run deep. Often there are many generations living near each other. There is a great respect for our elders and family history here, and all these stories are not the same. And in that, Hawaii's diversity really is its strength. It represents how different cultures, religious groups, and communities can respect each other, celebrate, and support one another. Now, that's not to say there aren't challenges. There are grave challenges here that threaten these values. We've talked about some of them with lack of housing, affordable housing, high costs. There's a stark difference in educational opportunities from rural communities and town, public and private school options. There's a drug epidemic. There's a lot of social issues and problems. However, my experience as a U.S. diplomat has taught me that promoting long-term change involves having these hard conversations because these outcomes change lives and they take time. The sharing of different experiences from across the Pacific that we've heard today or during this conference are the stories that we all need to hear and that we need to be willing to fight for. When I consider the challenges that many face around the world, I hope that each of us can continue to be a champion, to be a voice in this conversation and to ensure all are free to live their beliefs with dignity and in peace. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you all. I'd now like to open it up to the group here to ask questions of our panelists. I know we haven't had that opportunity a lot, and so I wanted to make sure we had time. We have about 15 minutes, which is a lot of time. So please, if you have a question, we have a microphone right there.
Thank you for that. As I should explain our office a little bit, I work for the Office of International Religious Freedom in the State Department. This office is the result of bipartisan support from Congress to have this be a key part of our foreign policy. So given that context, we are a policy-making office. It is a congressionally mandated office that wants to know, the congressional mandate requires our office to be informed, to be able to fully inform our policy-making, decision-making processes. And so as part of that, a key part of what we do, actually a main piece of what we do, is an extensive data collection and information gathering piece. We just celebrated 75 years in this office since we were established, and I would say this is, as many things in the government, it's a work in progress. Understanding how this concept of international religious freedom or belief is understood, is implemented, how it's being shaped in every different country, in every different region. It's an organic process that's happening. As mentioned in many of the panels, the articles under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights indicate religious freedom and include the human dignity piece. And so I would say that while we are focused on advocating for a lot of the freedoms that we find enshrined in all of human rights that are independent upon each other. So for example, not just the ability to believe my religion, but we believe that you can meet with other people, you can assemble, you can move, you can express your opinion openly, feeling that you are not going to be jailed, killed, targeted, separated, economically disadvantaged, that should be a free right given to all, but that's interdependent upon all other human rights. So I guess the short answer is that how the distinction is between international religious freedom or belief, how it's manifested, what freedom of conscience or expression, and the human dignity piece means, it all works together. I have seen in many different instances our advocacy efforts working towards different goals. And I think that this conference today speaks to a big piece of it, which is really understanding when we're working with our counterparts. When I say counterparts, I mean like the US working with another country, really understanding where we're coming from in terms of our perception of the same value. That is critical, and that is something that our policy is still trying to meet up with.
Thank you for that answer. Any other questions?
Hello. We're really fortunate. In the 1800s, we have an incredible amount of resources that are available to us. In the 1800s, there were over 100 different newspapers that were being published within the Hawaiian language. And so we look at those resources. They have become a lot of our literature in our schools. They have a lot of beautiful languaging in it and also cultural ideas in it. But in addition to that, we're really fortunate that we have recordings of native speakers. Back in the 1980s, and it ran for many, many years, we have Ka leo Hawaii. I remember as a young student here at BYU Hawaii, on Sunday nights for an hour from 7 to 8. We had a host, Larry Kimura, well known by many, many people, both here in Hawaii and outside of Hawaii, for his publications, for his compositions and music. But I think one of his greatest treasures that he has given to us are these recordings of native speakers. So hundreds, if not thousands, of recording it. And it was kind of based on a talk story type of interaction. He would invite native speakers to actually come down to the radio station, and he would interview them. They would share their music, their songs, their stories, their culture from when they grew up. And all of that is now being made available online, where you can access that. After he would interview his the native speakers, then we would also have an opportunity where people who are listening on the radio who could call in and ask different questions. And so you have this beautiful languaging of our native speakers going on, where you could hear the pronunciations and the intonations, the idioms and cultural things. So it definitely has a place, an important place in the talk story and being a part of the culture and community today. Did I answer your question? Yeah? Okay, mahalo. If I could just add on to some of the resources that we have in terms of legends, and even our olelo no'eau are brought about because of that talk story of Mary Kawena Pukui, who has gone out into the communities and have talked with people and have made these recordings and documented that information. So yeah, it is definitely something that we should continue. Mahalo. I can start off with that one. If you look at Nanai Kekumu, which are some resources, books that Mary Kawena Pukui has written. She has shared, of course, hospitality is such an important part of welcoming people and bringing them in, that feeling of aloha. A lot of our traditional stories with Kane and Kanaloa, as they were visiting around the island into new places, visiting people that they didn't know, that sense of hospitality was so important, to the sense that if they went to a home and they asked for water or for something to eat, if it wasn't given, then there were some consequences that followed. For example, as Kane and Kanaloa went to a couple, went to their home, and they had this beautiful fresh water, drinking water, but turned them down, oh, we don't have enough to share with you. So they went on their journey, went to this older couple, asked them for water, and they're very apologetic. So, kalamai, our water, it's not fresh water, it's kind of salty, water, but we will share everything that we have with you. And fed them, gave them water, provided a place for them to sleep, and Kane and Kanaloa continued on their journey. The next day, the first couple who woke up, their nice fresh water was now salty. The older couple who had provided and were very hospitable, their salty water was now fresh. And so these type of stories, we have the story of Pele, is very familiar to all of us too, where she could take on different personages and did the same thing. If she was given food, drink, people treated her with hospitality, then there were great blessings that came to those people. And the opposite is also true. So we have these stories that have been passed down for generations and generations that tell us in greeting people, visitors, welcoming them is so important. And those same values continue on today. Adoption. That was, we have keiki hanai. It didn't have to be legal, right? It was just you would take someone and care for them. And I still know of people who do that today. If they see someone who's in danger, being neglected, abused, they will welcome them into their home and raise them. So keiki hanai, keiki is child. Hanai is to feed, to clothe. So that idea of keiki hanai is I will take you on as my own, to care for you, to provide for you. And so it was done anciently, but I see it still happening today. Aye.
I'm interested in your thoughts on the honua system. We have in Fiji the vanua, and many other Pacific islands have this same view of the world and society. And it looks like it's a little similar to what we do in religion. We are trying to bring an old text, and for us it's the Bible, and how we make that Bible relevant for today. Something that was a medium for salvation during Jesus' time and in history, and how we bring that was salvation in history, make that available today. Our cultural texts have gone through quite a big change, In Fiji, they're trying to reintroduce the Great Council of Chiefs. So I'm leaning towards comparing this, like reinterpreting the Bible for today, and especially when these texts are in the middle of modernity of today and also in the past. How do you see that? How do you see the making relevant these cultural texts, which are undergoing threat on almost, and even the custodians of these cultural texts are giving up this in exchange for money. Our chiefs are supposed to be custodians of the Honu or the Vanua, land, sea. But when money comes, I take the money. So how do you see how do we make relevant a cultural text like the Honu or the Vanua?
Okay, when you say honua, I just want to make sure that I'm on the right thought. Honua is place. So when you refer to honua and cultural texts, can you explain a little bit more?
I might be wrong, but it's similar to the concept of the vanua. For us in Fiji, the vanua meaning land, people, and the world of spirit. It's the whole view of cosmos. That's and to represent that, we have this vanua, which is really I'm calling it a cultural text that defines who your identity in the world.
Okay. All right. I just told we have 2 minutes, but again, going back to our text from the 1800s, we have the writings of David Malo. We have writings of Papa'i'i. It's in Hawaiian. That's why you need to know Hawaiian. But there have been some translations of these documents also. David Malo, it's now like a 3 are two editions, very thick books, where they compare Hawaiian and it's also translated. So more and more we're having them being translated from Hawaiian to English, so it opens it up and makes it more accessible. I think one of the most well-known, most related to people and place would be our kumulipo, which has been around for centuries. And through the works of those in the 1800s, put it down in writing, which is over 2,000 lines, which originally was all memorized. It would take hours to recite. But we're fortunate that we still have access for those documents, the kumulipo, which talks about you have that duality, things in the land, which also have the same characteristics of things in the ocean, that relationship between the two. And it talks about the different va, or time periods of creation, that is from a Hawaiian perspective. It's a document of genealogy, of our akua, how we're related to them, of our Lāʻie. So it's a combination of place, creation. So it basically, kumulipo is our creation chant from beginning. And so that, I think, is probably the most relevant document, and as I mentioned, oral history from before. We still, one of the things that we've been working on in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is making sure that we also maintain and have accessibility to documents, our scriptures in Hawaiian. We know in 1855 we have Jonathan Napela, along with George Buchanan, who translated the Book of Mormon into Hawaiian. And that was revised in 1905 in the office of Joseph F. Smith, who served 3 missions here in Hawaii and went on to become the prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He invited Jacob Gates, Napukapa was his Hawaiian name, to go and revise and update those scriptures that are now accessible on our phones, is accessible online. Additional work that we've been doing is also the Doctrine of Covenants, which is Napelika me Nakawoha, Kamomi Vaivai, which is the Pearl of Great Price, which were originally translated in 1914 into the Hawaiian language, but became inaccessible, except if you went to the archives. But then you could only utilize it and feel it and see it for a short amount of time. Fortunately, we have some personal copies where we've been able to work on those and work with the Sacred Materials office in Salt Lake City to ensure that those documents and scriptures are now accessible to anyone throughout the world in the Hawaiian language. The language in those scripture books are just beautiful. Just beautiful. And as a Hawaiian, when I read that, it gives so much more meaning, and the heart of my language, it makes so much more sense. And I'll just give you a short example. I mean, in the scriptures we hear all the time, verily, verily, I say unto you. And I remember growing up as a child, it's like, verily, verily, I didn't know what that meant. I thought, oh, it's kind of like tra-la-la, tra-la-la, you know. But when you look at the Hawaiian, he oia i'o, he oia i'o, ka'ue o lelo aku nei ia oi. A truth, I say unto you. And when you understand the meaning of verily, that I am, normally it's Christ saying this. I think you're kind of open your ears and open your mind more deeply if you understand that he is saying, this is truth. This is important. You need to understand this. Listen and heed. And so it's a combination, you know, we look at our cultural, our historical, our ancient documents that have been passed down and find that relationship. What is that relationship between the Kumulipo and our modern scriptures that we have today? Because there are definite relationships that testify that there is a God and that he lives and has created us. And going back to, I love the opening, that dignity, human dignity, is knowing that we have been created in the image of God because he loves us. Mahalo nui loa.